Давай, 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 гусь ебаный.
A few weeks ago, we made a video about how Ukraine's Azov brigade turned hunting Russians into a 24/7 McDonald's operation, an industrialized kill chain that runs in shifts, around the clock, with the ruthless efficiency of a fast food assembly line. Spot, identify, strike, reset, repeat. That video blew up. And since then, the McDonald's metaphor has taken on a life of its own. Because something happened on the front line that nobody could have scripted. A group of Russian soldiers, starving, freezing, abandoned by their command, contacted Ukraine's I Want to Live surrender hotline through a Telegram chat bot. They followed a Ukrainian drone to a pickup point. They laid down their weapons. And the first thing they were given after being processed as prisoners of war? A McDonald's meal. Not as a joke, not as propaganda, as food. Because the Russian soldiers who surrendered hadn't eaten a proper meal in weeks. Their supply lines had been cut by Ukrainian drone strikes. Their commanders had stopped sending rations. And when Ukrainian forces handed them a burger and fries, some of them broke down. That image, Russian soldiers eating McDonald's after surrendering to the country they were sent to destroy, is the single most devastating piece of psychological warfare in this entire conflict. Not because of the burger, because of what the burger represents. Russia can't feed its soldiers. Ukraine can feed Russia's soldiers. Russia closed its McDonald's, Ukraine reopened theirs, including one in Mykolaiv, 70 kilometers from the front line, in March 2026. The country being invaded has better logistics, better morale, and better fast food than the country doing the invading. Ukraine's I Want to Live program, launched in September 2022 as an experimental hotline, 10 Ukrainian military psychologists in a secret location answering phone calls from Russian soldiers who wanted to give up. The concept was simple. Call the number, text the Telegram bot, provide your identity, and Ukrainian forces will coordinate a safe surrender. You'll be treated as a prisoner of war under the Geneva Conventions, 3 meals a day, medical care, a phone call home. 4 years later, over 10,000 Russian soldiers have surrendered through the program. The majority of those, the vast majority, did so in 2025 and early 2026. The website has been accessed over 36 million times. 32 million of those visits came from inside Russia. The Kremlin blocked the site. Soldiers found workarounds. They use VPNs. They use encrypted Telegram channels. They call from burner phones at night when their commanders aren't watching. The process has evolved into something remarkably sophisticated. A Russian soldier contacts the chatbot. He provides personal details, name, unit, location. Ukrainian intelligence verifies the information. A reconnaissance drone is dispatched to the area. The soldier receives instructions. Go to a specific location at a specific time. A Ukrainian drone appears overhead. The soldier follows the drone, physically follows it, walking behind it like a dog following its owner, to a Ukrainian position. He lays down his weapon. He's processed. He's given food, water, medical attention, and legal counsel. The drone-guided surrender is perhaps the most surreal innovation of this war. Ukrainian forces released instructional videos, in Russian, showing exactly how to surrender to a drone. Step 1. Throw down your weapon. Step 2. Raise your hands. Step 3. Follow the drone. It flies ahead of you at walking pace, guiding you through minefields and contested terrain to a safe Ukrainian position. The image of a Russian soldier, a grown man with a rifle, obediently following a buzzing quadcopter like a child following a parent through a parking lot, is simultaneously absurd and deeply human. It's a man choosing life over duty, and Ukraine made it as easy as following a blinking light. The program operates from a secure facility manned by military psychologists who speak fluent Russian. Many of the callers aren't on the front line yet. They're calling from inside Russia before deployment, asking what to do when they arrive. Some are mothers calling about their sons. Some are wives whose husbands received mobilization papers at traffic checkpoints. The hotline processes between 200 and 300 calls daily. Russia's prosecutor general blocked the website. It didn't matter. The Telegram channel is encrypted. The VPNs work. The information spreads through the same social media channels that Russian soldiers use to post combat footage. If he's eventually returned to Russia in a prisoner exchange, the official record shows he was captured, not that he surrendered voluntarily. This detail matters enormously, because Russian military law treats voluntary surrender as treason, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The program is designed to remove every barrier to giving up. It even protects the surrendering soldier from his own government. The Second Corps Kartia recently captured 3 Russian soldiers near Kupiansk, who initiated contact through the chatbot. One of them told interrogators he'd been stationed in the area for months without rotation. No relief, no support, no indication that anyone in the Russian command structure even knew he was still there. He wasn't surrendering because he was scared. He was surrendering because he'd been forgotten. The McDonald's moment wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a systemic Russian logistics collapse that has been building for months. In April 2026, Ukrainian military intelligence released material, shared with and reported by the Sunday Times, documenting at least 5 incidents in which Russian infantrymen allegedly resorted to cannibalism after running out of food during the winter months. The most detailed case reportedly occurred near Mirnohrad in the contested Donetsk region in November 2025. A Russian soldier with the call sign Kromoy, roughly translated as Limpy, was caught after killing 2 soldiers and attempting to eat the leg of one of them. Russia dismissed the allegations as fabrications, but the broader pattern of food deprivation is independently confirmed from multiple sources. Captured Russian soldiers increasingly tell interrogators they haven't eaten properly in days or weeks. Bradley Martin, a former US Navy captain and senior research fellow at RAND Corporation, stated that reports of poor supply to Russian infantry are wholly credible, and that troop support is not a major priority of the Russian army. By the end of 2025, Russia had increased its ground forces in Ukraine to approximately 710,000 soldiers. Moscow aims to recruit another 409,000 in 2026. That's over 1 million troops that need food, water, ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies, delivered daily across a 1,200-kilometer front through roads and rail networks that Ukraine is systematically destroying with long-range drone strikes. And this is where the two halves of the McDonald's metaphor connect. Ukraine's kill chain doesn't just target Russian soldiers, it targets the supply lines that keep those soldiers alive. Drone operators hit fuel depots, they hit ammunition trucks, they hit train depots in Crimea, they hit logistics convoys on predictable road networks. Military analyst Vikram Mittal noted that resupply vehicles are particularly vulnerable because they generally lack armor and are constrained to predictable road networks with little cover or concealment. The result? Russian soldiers at the front are hungry. Russian soldiers at the front are cold. Russian soldiers at the front are watching drones circle overhead 24 hours a day, knowing that any movement, even walking to a supply drop, might be their last. And somewhere on their phone, hidden from their commander, is a Telegram channel that says, "Surrender, we'll feed you." In part 1, we broke down how Azov's Unmanned Systems Battalion industrialized drone warfare. Pilots working in shifts, drones launched in sequence, the entire operation running like a conveyor belt. Since that video, the system has evolved in 3 critical ways. First, ground robots. Ukraine has deployed over 22,000 unmanned ground vehicle missions since February, with a target of 50,000 UGVs on the front line in 2026. Logistics that used to require a human soldier running through drone-saturated terrain, ammunition, water, food, casualty evacuation, is increasingly handled by machines. The kill chain now has a supply chain that doesn't bleed. Every UGV mission that replaces a human soldier is a life saved and a logistics run that can't be disrupted by Russian fire. Second, fiber optic drones. Russia spent billions on electronic warfare systems designed to jam radio-controlled drones. Ukraine responded by developing FPV drones that transmit their signal through a physical fiber optic cable, a spool of glass wire that unspools behind the drone as it flies. There is literally nothing to jam. No radio frequency, no GPS signal, no electronic emission. Russia's entire EW investment became obsolete because of a piece of string. The Rattle H ground robot now carries its own fiber optic drone launcher, meaning a machine can drive to within 500 meters of a Russian position, launch an unjammable drone directly into it, and drive away. No human involved at any step. Third, AI-guided interceptors. The Terra A1 and Terra A2 interceptor drones, developed in Ukraine, now funded by Japanese investment, autonomously hunt and destroy incoming Russian Shaheds. The kill chain has expanded from offense to defense. Ukraine isn't just running a 24/7 attack operation, it's running a 24/7 defense operation at the same time. The McDonald's metaphor has gone from one restaurant to a franchise. Multiple automated systems running simultaneously, each one optimized for a different mission, all operating around the clock. The combined effect on Russian morale is devastating. Captured soldiers describe the drone presence as inescapable. The buzzing never stops, day and night, every movement tracked, every vehicle targeted within minutes of stopping. Some units have started refusing assault orders entirely. Others sprint from cover to cover in groups of 2 or 3, abandoning any pretense of tactical formation, because anything larger than a fire team attracts a swarm. This is where the McDonald's story becomes about more than just warfare. It becomes about what kind of country each side is fighting for. In March 2026, McDonald's reopened in Mykolaiv, a southern Ukrainian city that withstood Russia's assault in the opening weeks of the war, less than 70 kilometers from the front line. The reopening had been delayed for years because Russia destroyed the nearby Kakhovka Dam in 2023, plunging the city into a water crisis. New water infrastructure finally made it possible. McDonald's now operates nearly 120 restaurants in Ukraine, more than before Russia's invasion. City councils across the country competed to secure new locations. A McDonald's opened in Transcarpathia, the only region that didn't have one yet. The company plans to open 10 more in 2026. Meanwhile, Russia closed all 850 of its McDonald's locations in 2022. They were rebranded as Vkusno i Tochka, tasty, period, with a different logo, different supply chain, and by most accounts, different quality. The golden arches were replaced. The Big Mac was replaced. The symbol of Western consumer culture that once represented the thawing of Cold War tensions was erased from Russian life. So here's the contrast. Ukraine, the country being bombed, invaded, and fighting for survival, has more McDonald's than before the war. Russia, the country doing the bombing and invading, has 0. Ukrainian soldiers can get a Big Mac on leave. Russian soldiers can't get a hot meal at the front. When a surrendering Russian soldier is handed a McDonald's bag, the message isn't subtle. It's, look at what you're missing. Look at what your government took from you. Look at what the country you're fighting has that yours doesn't. It's not just food. It's a proxy for everything. Normality, comfort, connection to the rest of the world. Ukraine has it. Russia gave it up. And now Russia's soldiers are giving themselves up to get it back. The surrender pipeline is accelerating at the same time that Russia's recruitment pipeline is collapsing. German intelligence analysis reported that Russia's rate of recruiting contract soldiers fell 20% in early 2026 compared to 2025. The signing bonuses that lured men into service, which peaked at around $22,000 in some regions, are losing their appeal as word spreads about the reality of frontline conditions. Social media posts from soldiers describing starvation, abandonment, and relentless drone attacks are reaching Russian families despite censorship. Russia's central bank chief admitted the country faces an unprecedented labor shortage. The Ryazan region's governor forced businesses to select workers for military service. Recruitment offices are targeting migrant workers, offering Russian citizenship in exchange for military service. Reports have emerged of recruitment drives in African countries. The math is simple. Russia needs 409,000 new troops in 2026. It's losing 35,000 per month to casualties. Its recruitment rate is falling. And 10,000 have already walked away through a Telegram chatbot. Every soldier who surrenders tells his story to other soldiers, through smuggled phones, through family networks, through the same social media channels the Kremlin can't fully control. Each surrender is an advertisement for the next one. Ukraine's I Want to Live program isn't just a humanitarian gesture, it's a weapon system, one that targets the most critical vulnerability in Russia's entire war machine, the willingness of individual human beings to keep fighting. So let's connect the dots. Ukraine built a kill chain that operates 24/7 with the efficiency of a fast food franchise. That kill chain is now augmented by 50,000 ground robots, fiber optic drones that can't be jammed, and AI-guided interceptors funded by Japanese investment. The system runs day and night, every day, on every sector of the front. On the other side, Russian soldiers are starving. Their supply lines are being shredded by the same drone operators who hunt them. Their commanders aren't sending food. Some units have allegedly resorted to cannibalism. Their recruitment pipeline is collapsing, and 10,000 of them have already contacted a Telegram chatbot to ask how to give up. When they surrender, they get a McDonald's meal. The country they were sent to destroy feeds them better than the country that sent them. That's not just a military strategy, that's a psychological demolition. Ukraine isn't just killing Russian soldiers. It's making Russian soldiers not want to be Russian soldiers anymore. And when you break someone's will to fight, when the guy next to you in the trench is looking up surrender instructions on his phone instead of loading his magazine, it doesn't matter how many tanks Moscow pulls out of storage, or how many recruits it conscripts from Ryazan. So here's my question. At what point does the surrender rate become strategically decisive? If 10,000 have already walked away through one program, how many more are thinking about it? And what happens when the next wave of 409,000 Russian recruits, men with no training, no motivation, and a smartphone with Telegram installed, arrives at a front line where the buzzing never stops and the only hot meal comes from the other side? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you're new. This is part 2, so go watch part 1 if you haven't already. Links on screen. I'll see you in the next one.